Hi everyone. So last week we looked at chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes, we kind of ended up with this whole thing of balance. He tried to suggest that the way of true wisdom was to choose funerals over feasts and mourning over dancing kind of thing, and played us and then suggested that the extremes were wrong as well. And this whole call that he tried to make towards balance, the balanced life rather than the extremist life, and how challenging that is to us, because all of us seem to have this inherent bias to go to extremes to feel fulfilled. So he touched on that, and at the end of that you would think, okay, he's going to talk about wisdom now, and he does. He's going to talk about wisdom as the wise course. And he is speaking into a culture of the Greek wisdom tradition as well. People would know in the Platos and the Aristotles, and he's engaging, I guess, in that kind of a context of the pursuit of wisdom. And he's going to tell two stories in chapters 8 and 9 that sandwich together the rest of the text. One at the start of chapter 8 and one at the end of chapter 9, which I want to start with. I want to look at these two stories because I think it typifies how he sees wisdom, and that it is not a true and sustainable course. If anything, it's also profoundly disappointing, even though he prefers wisdom over folly. But you will wonder when you hit chapter 10 whether that's the case. But anyway, so here we are. So what I want to do is read the first half of chapter 8 of Ecclesiastes, and I'm going to skip some bits. So if you've read chapters 8 and 9 before I start, that would be great. And but this section's worth reading because it's fascinating. So Ecclesiastes chapter 8 verse 1. Who is like the wise man who knows the interpretation of a thing? Wisdom makes one's face shine, and the hardness of one's countenance is changed. Keeps the king's command because of your sacred oath. Do not be terrified, go from his presence. Do not delay when the matter is unpleasant, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is powerful, and who can say to him, what are you doing? Whoever obeys a command will meet no harm, and the wise mind will know the time and way. For every matter has its time and way, although the troubles of mortals lie heavy upon them. Indeed, they do not know what it is to be, for who can tell them how it will be? No one has power over the wind to restrain the wind, or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from the battle, nor does wickedness deliver those who practice it. All this I observed, applying my mind to all that is under the sun, while one man exercises authority over another to the one's hurt. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity, because sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily. The human heart is fully set to do evil. Though sinners do evil 100 times and prolong their lives, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they stand in fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked. Neither will they prolong their days like a shadow, because they do not stand in fear before God. This is a really interesting passage. And I think the frustration that the writer of Ecclesiastes feels, that is, he eventually talks about the fact that wickedness is not going to work long term. And those who fear God will actually in some way be vindicated, but he's very vague about how we'll be vindicated, because he's interested in life under the sun. Okay, so but his hints at the afterlife are thin indeed, like the reference to God in heaven and we're on earth. There's not much more. He is really targeting those who think they get away with things on earth, and that's what he looks at with this first passage that we're looking at today. And he looks at kingship. And if anything represented a challenge to wisdom, it was the unbridled power of kings. Kings just had it all. And when we read this kind of a passage, we think of Joseph appearing before Pharaoh, or Daniel before Nebuchadnezzar, or even probably more so Esther as she appears before the king with the threats of Haman over her head. That the monarchs had unbridled, well, kind of omnipotence, really, and they really did do whatever they pleased. And this is the wrestle that we're being faced with. But before we do that, I want to read you a little thing of that an Assyrian monarch said. So the Assyrians wiped out the northern kingdom of Israel. So they were a big noise for a season, and then they are gone. But Nineveh was their capital, who Jonah was sent to. So we know the Assyrians from that narrative quite well. But this is the Assyrian king Ashurnasirpal telling us about himself. Here it goes. And now at the commands of the great gods, my sovereignty, my dominion, and my power are manifesting themselves. I am regal. I am lordly. I am exalted. I am mighty. I am honoured. I am glorified. I am preeminent. I am powerful. I am valiant. I am lion brave. And I am heroic. The mighty king, the king of Assyria, chosen of Sin, the god Sin, favourite of Anu, another god, beloved of Adad, mighty one among the gods. You'll notice how he put himself among the gods. He's not just a worshipper of God, he's one of them, but he's beloved of them, and he's exalted, he's all powerful, he's lion brave. Now, that kind of a toxic ideology that you hold for yourself, you know, and kings and empires were unbridled in those days. They had unlimited power. There's no such thing as democracy. It was all or nothing, and the kings had it all. They were the personification of the gods. More recent is Genghis Khan. I just want to read a little quote from Genghis Khan, which gives you an idea of the level of his character. Genghis Khan means universal ruler. So even his name is saying something big, and it says this, Genghis, the greatest joy is to conquer one's enemies, to pursue them, to seize their property, to see their family in tears, to ride their horses, and to possess their daughters and wives. I mean, Genghis actually had to hunt far and wide for enemies. He went wherever he could, all the way to Europe to find enemies to subjugate. But there's this sheer cruelty that he loves to see them in tears, loves to possess their wives and daughters, to have everything. Obviously, that's not true of our day, or is it? I mean, the Idi Amins, the Stalins, in the world of sport, there's been a recent Netflix documentary on Michael Jordan, and there is a determination to win and pull his team through, and there's a tyranny that he exerted, which the documentary kind of reveals. Most of the kind of really significant business people, very few of them don't have a checkerboard of the damage to people they did. The Steve Jobs, you know, the movie, and around Facebook as well, the Mark Zuckerberg, you know, the fact that they just ruthlessly pursue success and the casualties along their way. So corporate megalomaniacs are more common now than the national megalomaniacs like Genghis Khan. But you've got to say there's some people who have come pretty close, but I'll leave that to you to figure out who that might be. Depends on your political persuasion, who you come up with. So these verses are about power, and it's about, well, that's a recurrent word, but I want to just highlight the first verse. It says, who's like the wise man? Because he's looking at wisdom and how much worth it actually has in the face of what life throws at wisdom, which is brutality. So I can be wise, but when life comes at me, what do? Because he says, who knows the interpretation of a thing? Wisdom makes one's face shine, and the hardness of one's countenance is changed. What he is saying here is that the thing that wisdom gives you is the ability to be guarded and to smile when you really want to throttle the guy. So imagine you're in the king's presence and the king is a tyrant and he's doing all this stuff and he has the power to do it. And you have to give counsel. And he says, what wisdom gives you is the ability to reduce the hardness of one's countenance. And it goes on, you know, there's the word, the king's word is powerful, it says, and no one can say, what are you doing? And then it goes on to say, but he doesn't have the power to control the wind or choose the day of death. So he's powerful, but he's not all powerful. But the kings have the appearance of all powerful. And so this approach of wisdom is that we're actually dealing with someone who appears all powerful and is not. And so the person who's wise will keep this in mind, that ultimately they will face God. But the verse that's really interesting is the end of verse 8. Nor does wickedness deliver those who practice it. This phrase here is a little bit evenly balanced. It could be translated, wickedness will not allow its possessors to escape, to be delivered. What that's saying is that you can think you can use wickedness, but you won't be able to escape from the clutches of wickedness. It will actually deal to you as well. And there's plenty of stories of that, biblical narratives about that, but also modern stories about how wickedness always catches up with the wicked. Not always. So at the end of the first paragraph, the teacher of Ecclesiastes says this: all this I've observed, applying my mind to what is done under the sun, while one person exercises authority or power over another to the other's hurt. And this is the horrific thing about power, that it can be used to just damage people effortlessly. I think one of the hardest things to recover from is when power is done to you, when position is used brutally. And you hear people who have been damaged by bosses, by teachers, by parents, by pastors, who use their position to crush another person. And the writer of Ecclesiastes finds this as appalling, that even if this person is wise, even if they are wise, this person with power can crush them and be unaccountable. And so he goes on to say, and he saw the wicked buried, and they used to go in and out of the holy place and they were praised, and this is all vanity. I.e., even at death, sometimes the wicked don't get their comeuppance. They literally get honoured, even though they deserve to be despised. And there's so much of this in the world where misbehaviour does not lead to exposure or to being shame, unless for certain crimes that are deemed unacceptable. Now, the wise are told one thing, and it's an interesting recurrence of a phrase. For verse 6 says this: for every matter has its time and way. Okay. This phrase is the wise man will know, mind will know the time and way. Now this phrase time is season. Everything has its season and way, or judgment. That word has recurred as well. And what this is saying here is the response of wisdom to unbridled power is to know the season we're in and to discern what the way actually is. Tell you a bit of a story. When I started teaching, I taught at a boys' school, and rugby ruled. It was like, so I was a basketball coach, and I ended up coaching the A team. And basically everything was rugby, and basketball didn't matter a toss. But it was my second year at the school, and my ability to stand up for my sport was limited. But my top centre, he was a really gifted basketball player and a very average rugby player. But he got asked to join the first 15. He was in the second 15 and they were short of locks. So he got asked to move up. And he came and told me that he'd been told he couldn't play basketball anymore because he was now in the first 15. So see you later. So I pondered this and thought about what was the way to deal with this. Because if I'd gone and complained that my centre had been taken and he's now in the first 15, the rector would have said, well, that's the way it is. You know, he's in the first 15 now and they have to exclusively train for that. So I pondered this for a number of days. And when I went to see the rector, I booked an appointment, dropped in and said, I'm a bit concerned because one of my players has dropped out in the middle of the season. And I feel like the school value of loyalty is really important. And he said, yes, he's not going to step down. This is boys high. We're teaching them loyalty to a team, loyalty to the school. I said, and he said, well, so what's his name? I said, Baden. And he registered. And I said, he's been pulled into the first 15 and he's been told he's not allowed to play. And I think this is a breach of our school culture. And the principal knew that he was toast. He had to make an exception. So I got my player back. It was a lukewarm victory because his heart wasn't in it after that. But thinking about think about the prophet Nathan, who God tells David has committed adultery. And Nathan thinks, what is the way to tell David this? And so he tells the story of a rich man who took a poor man's lamb, killed it, and David says, you know, I'm going to give justice, I'm angry. And Nathan says, you are the man. That he knew the time and the way. He didn't rush. That took him weeks, months before he confronted David with his sin. Wisdom has a time and a way. And the truth is, there may never be a time. There may never be a time to confront. Watching people who've been destroyed by the media in our cultures is disturbing. It's not safe to enter the conversations. We've had the gay marriage debate. We've had the legalization of prostitution, and we've had a number of social change debates that took place. But there was only one side in the media because they just slaughter anybody who would speak an alternate view. It's impossible to have a conversation in a culture of extremes. And our ability to do dialogue as a culture, you know, has been tragically lost. In our upcoming election, there will be a referendum on legalisation of marijuana, and there is no way there will be an intelligent conversation on the mental health risks or anything like that. They're attempting to railroad it through without conversation. It remains to be seen whether there will be a time and a way to actually have a conversation. I want to suggest that the unbridled power in our culture now resides, a lot of it, in the media and the way information is controlled, all the way up to possibly Google, you know, but because these are wealthy corporations who have agendas. I'd like to believe in them wholeheartedly, but there you go. Power is brutal. And so at the end of this, we see that even in death, sometimes the evil are honoured. And we see this with some of the famous people who misbehaved horrendously, and yet we pretend they're good. And sometimes the church joins in, which is also horrendous. So, wisdom is not offered as a particularly safe place to inhabit the halls of power. In fact, it's kind of saying it's safer not to be there. So if wisdom is so great, but it doesn't work with power, what can you say about it? The last story in these two chapters, in terms of the end of chapter 9, I'll just read. It's from verse 13. I have seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. were being set up here. It seemed great to me, so you know it's going to be disappointing. There was a little city with few people in it. A great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than might. Yet the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heeded. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouting of a ruler among fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one bungler destroys much good. So this close-off story about wisdom is quite a different one to the first one. The first one was about dealing with navigating the halls of power. This one's when unbridled power comes against you. He says, well, this poor wise man had the smarts to deliver his tiny city against this great king with siege works. So we're not told whether it was diplomacy or whether it was a military strategy. We don't know. All it is a tale. And at the end of it, the poor wise man's forgotten, never thanked. He's a nothing. I wonder whether the story of Mordecai is in the back here. Remember, Mordecai had saved the king and he'd never been remembered until Esther brings it to the king's attention. And so that may be the biblical thread that's coming through here. But either way, his wisdom's despised. So the first story is about wisdom, how you navigate and keep your hide. Now this guy saves everybody's hides and it's worthless. So the presentation of wisdom as the path of balance and the path of the way to greatness is completely eroded by the fact that either you can only just save your hide through using wisdom, or you might actually save everybody and nobody remembers, i.e. it's ultimately worthless. This kind of relentless approach of the teacher is really annoying. He doesn't give us anywhere to hide. We think, oh, you know, I can make a difference here, and I'm going to do my utmost to rescue this situation, this business, this crisis or whatever. And you either get destroyed by trying to do it, or nobody even notices or remembers. Wisdom looks great until you face the reality. And then the wrong people get celebrated. And he actually goes to say, verse 14 of chapter 8, there is a vanity that takes people on earth, that there are righteous people who are treated according to the conduct of the wicked, and there are wicked people who are treated according to the conduct of the righteous. I don't think the wise course will earn you the praise of anybody. In fact, he's actually suggesting it's a pretty crappy road to choose. Okay, so this destruction of wisdom as a course is sobering. I want to just highlight three other things in these two chapters that he doesn't want us to miss. Chapter 9, verse 1, he says, all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hands of God. Whether it is love or hate, one does not know. Everything that confronts them is vanity, since the same fate comes to all, to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to those who sacrifice and those who do not sacrifice. As are the good, so are the sinners, those who swear like those who shun an oath. It is an evil in all that happens under the sun, that the same fate comes to everyone. The Old Testament view of death was that everybody went to the grave, or Sheol. Now this is not about hell. And Jesus plays this out in the Gospels too, where he talks about the grave in one of the parables. But this whole thing that we all go to the same place, the place of death. There's no sense that there's a good or bad place of death. That all there is grave. We get swallowed up. And as it says later, it's better a living dog than a dead lion, i.e., you're better to stay alive, because in the grave nobody knows anything. Even if you're a lion, you're dead. You don't know anything. As it says in verse 6, their love and their hate and their envy have already perished. Never again will they have any share in all that happens under the sun. And what he's valuing here is that what happens under the sun is good. Life is good. But don't think that all the evil that happens on earth is sorted out at death, because everybody dies. And whether somebody live for love or hate doesn't make any difference when people face death. This is really hard for Christians to accept. We have this justice gene that makes us think that the wicked should get theirs kind of, with a grim death, or, immediately go into judgment or whatever. And what this passage is actually saying is only God knows about this. We don't know. We really don't know what happens. But everybody dies just the same. Now, he's not suggesting that we misbehave for this reason. He's merely stating the very obvious thing, that however wise you think you are, however clever you think you are, all these paths lead to death, the same place that befalls us all. This is the kind of the key thing, that it's all Hebel, really. That's the drumbeat. We're back to the drumbeat. It's all Hebel. And don't think you can defeat death. Everybody's path gets sorted at death. Now, the second thread that chapter 9 hits is the fickleness of life. So death basically ends it for everybody. We all face the same thing. But also life is fickle. And I often quote this passage. I actually thought it was in Jeremiah, but I got badly corrected here. Verse 11 of chapter 9, it says, "Again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favour to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. For no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, and like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity when it suddenly falls upon them." This is grim stuff, but I love this phrase. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Malcolm Gladwell wrote an interesting book called Outliers, and in it he is trying to destroy the whole idea that you're talented and work hard, you'll be successful. And the first story he tells is a story of ice hockey players. I've got sympathy for this, love our ice hockey. And he said, basically, if someone's big, if they're fast, and if they're skillful, you would think that gives them a chance. If they have that talent and they work hard, they'll make it. And then he shows us some teams, and you're looking at him thinking, why is he showing us these teams? It's got all their birth dates and the team they played for and how they've got to the NHL and stuff. And you're looking in there and you're thinking, what's the point? And he says, look at the birthdays. And you look, and they're all born January, February, March. Just about nobody's born in December. So the players that made it into these elite teams, and I'm not sure if it's still true, but I suspect it is, they were born January, February, March. And the reason why is the age groups are in year blocks. And so if you're born in January, you're pretty much a year older, at the age of 5 than somebody who's born in December, and you're playing against each other. You've got a year's more development. And at the end of that year, they create the divisions, and the good players go to the top divisions, get the top coaching, and the not so good players get the crap coaching. It's the American way. And so what happens is your birth date ends up a little bit of a self-fulfilling thing, that you've got an advantage, and that advantage, as it's streamed and increasingly streamed, it won't guarantee you'll make it, but the kids born in December are unlikely to make it. Now that's quite sobering, that your birthday could decide whether you're a professional ice hockey player. It's not exactly a level playing field. And he goes through his books and in his book and looks at a whole lot of zones where you think it's fair, and you realize it's really not fair. It's set. And the race does not necessarily go to the swift or the battle to the strong. It's not fair. And we often see this in the entertainment industry, where actors with just about no talent become the superstars. I mean, I like The Rock. I mean, The Rock is nice. I mean, he's the highest paid male actor, and you've got to say his emotional range is limited. You know, he's lovely, but you know, it's like, you know, all the movies that Tom Cruise does, he's got this money behind him that enables him to produce and buy movies and that he stars in. And he's a bit of a go-getter and everything like that, but let's face it, his emotional range is pretty narrow. He just does these action movies, you know. And, you know, but that success, and in music, it's exactly the same. You look at some of the biggest pop stars, and it's who they've got behind them. It's because they're cute. It's not because they're super talented. Our world is not a just world that rewards talent and hard work. We want to believe that it's fair, but it's not fair. And if we lived in India or Africa, we would know how unfair life is, that it doesn't fit in to allow the swift to succeed or the strong to succeed. Time and chance take us all, as it says here. Time and chance happen to them all. And he has seen this in life, and I think we all have, the tragedy that great talents don't necessarily succeed. After reading Glavell's book Outliers, I thought, man, this is amazing. I'm so not going to be a success. That wasn't my excuse, but I realised actually that for a whole lot of reasons, my time had passed. I have to be okay with what I am, not what I will never be. And this promise that success can happen is just such a lie. And in our culture, this belief in hard work and talent getting us there is deeply entrenched. And Ecclesiastes will have none of this. The race doesn't go to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. The last thing I want to highlight is where he wants us to land. And this is the only time he really gets to a point of instruction. And often wisdom literature instructs us how to live. And in verse 15 of chapter 8, he says, I commend enjoyment, for there is nothing better for people under the sun than to eat and drink and enjoy themselves, for this will go with them in their toil through the days of life that God gives them under the sun. He expands this in chapter 9. And I think this is quite beautiful. Go eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has long approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Do not let oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with your wife whom you love, all the days of your vain or your hebel life that are given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun, whatever your hand finds to do, do with all your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, in the grave, to where you are going. I can't resist pulling that one out. So what he's saying here is, do whatever you do with all your might. Don't be passive. Don't be a loser. Be proactive. Own what you have and do with whatever you can with all your might. But just don't forget, you're just going to go to the grave. You know, don't forget that. But do it with all your might. Be proactive. But I love this. Eat your bread with enjoyment. Drink your wine with a merry heart. Wear great clothes. Have oil on your head. And enjoy your wife. These are good things. The good things in life, as it said in chapter 6, don't follow your wandering desire. Be satisfied with what your eyes see. And this is what he's saying here. Look on the life that you have and enjoy it. This is hard because we want the fickle crowd. We want to run our swift race and the crowd to cheer us and to be one of those people. But he's told us the whole thing's fickle. The whole thing won't go your way. Chance and time happen to us all. And death will happen to us all, but choose to enjoy the portion that God gives you. Find contentment in your allotment, not what you are not allotted. This is a fascinating concept because it's so non-Western. We're so restless to keep moving on, keep being more successful. And in the Talmud, there's an interesting quote that James Lindbergh quotes in his commentary on Ecclesiastes, and it says this from the Talmud, which is the hedge around the law, the Torah that the rabbis wrote. And he says this: in the world to come, each one of us will be called to account for all the good things God put on earth, which we refused to enjoy. It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes as Christians, we feel guilty at pleasure, as in the joyful stuff. That's what pleasure is in Ecclesiastes, the things of joy. We feel guilty if we kind of spend money on ourselves. We feel guilty if we kind of just do things for fun. If we spend a whole lot on some clothes, or do stuff that, you know, we feel like is self-indulgent, we feel guilty. And the writer of Ecclesiastes is basically saying you can't take it with you. The grave happens, so enjoy it. I remember when we went to Spain and Italy, did a trip. I mean, I'm terrible at spending money on myself, other than my CD collecting addiction, and just spending that level of money, but the experience was just so rich. And I'm convinced I should have been born Italian. Just everything about that culture kind of makes sense to me on an emotional level. And the Latinos know how to live in life better than I think us kind of Germanic types. Anyway, this whole thing of collecting rich experiences and doing things that enrich life rather than living a sterile, empty life, which is unattractive because we're basically living apologetically for the things that we have. What we have is to be shared. It's not to be self-indulgent, but there should be a radical joy with sharing the things that God has given us, sharing our portion. I just want to close off on Eugene Peterson's Message version of chapter 9, verse 7. And he says this, you know, and I guess I want to encourage us to embrace living well because we're going to die. So why wouldn't we not live well? Do hospitality well, do friendship well, do marriage well, do being a parent well. He says this: seize life, eat bread with gusto, drink wine with a robust heart. Oh yes, God takes pleasure in your pleasure. Dress festively every morning. Don't skimp on colours and scarves. Where do you get scarves from? Don't, relish life with the spouse you love. Each and every day of your precarious life, your hebel life. Each day is God's gift. It's all you get in exchange for the hard work of staying alive. Make the most of each one. And may you do so. Amen.